All righty, and welcome. I'm Mark Pinto here with you again from Phoenixville Public Library, introducing you and inviting you to the next installment in our Community Gardening Around the Village series, sponsored by the library along with Phoenixville Communities That Care, Phoenixville Recreation Department, Phoenixville Area Transition Living Landscape, Penn State Extension, Camphill Kimberton Hills, Phoenixville Hospital, Trellis for Tomorrow, Chester County Food Bank, and Steeltown Village. Wow, great to have all of these organizations working together for this series. Making her second tour of duty in our series tonight is Martha Napolitan Cownap. She's herb gardener at Camphill Village Kimberton Hills. And her presentation tonight is Gardening for Dummies. No. It's called Backyard Gardening for the Complete Beginner. We ask that you have, if you have any questions, to type them in the chat during the presentation. Afterwards, she'll invite you to open up your microphones to ask a question that way. So with that, we welcome back Martha. Take it away.
All right, well, thank you for coming, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here. I have a slideshow for you tonight about how to grow vegetables and herbs for the complete beginner. Mark, can people see that now, or?
No, can't see anything except you right now.
Oh, okay. Let me see. I got to figure out how to share this.
You already have it open on your computer?
I do have it open. Wait a minute. Sure. Oh, here we go. Let's see. No, that's not it. What do you see? Oh, wait, there's something.
There we go.
Okay, you see some plants?
Yes.
Oops. Okay, all right, here we go. So, first thing, if you want to start a garden, you got to decide if you're going to grow in the ground or use containers, which mostly depends on your yard. If you have like 4 square feet of earth, you can grow in the ground, and in many ways that's easier. But if you only have concrete or you only have a porch or something, then use containers. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So you're going to look for a sunny spot, and unfortunately this is not the best time of year to see how sunny your yard is, because the trees don't have leaves on them yet. But in general, the south side of your house is going to be exposed to more sun, and because the sun comes from the south most of the day. But if you have a big tree like on the south side of your house, then maybe the east side or the west side is sunnier. You just got to watch the ground, especially once the leaves come out. But if you want to get started now before the leaves come out, I don't know, just go outside and try to figure out where the shade's going to be. And most plants grow best in the sun. There are some that grow okay in the shade, like lettuce and mint. Okay, so you need a sunny spot, you need water. You're not going to want to be like carrying water 50 yards from your house, but if the best place to have your garden is kind of far away from your water spigot, just get a good hose. So then, yeah, go ahead and start digging. And you got to really get out the weeds. You got to get them out by the roots and shake out all that soil. If you don't get the roots of the weeds out, they're going to just grow back. So dig deep and get out all the roots. Over the whole, that should be your first thing. Just clear out all the plants, all the grass, all the weeds. Okay, so I don't know if you can see both these pictures. Can you see the fork that my husband is holding? Because I can't.
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. All right, so you can see I'm smiling there because my husband is holding an actual garden fork. Now the lady in the other picture, the American Gothic, she's frowning because her husband, which is actually a dentist, is holding it's like a hay fork. It's not a garden fork. And I've seen people try to dig soil with a hay fork and it just bends all the tines. So get a fork. Can you guys see me? Because I want to show you what a proper garden fork is. It's got
Yep.
square tines. See those? If it has round tines, it's not the right kind of fork. But a fork is better than a shovel for digging up the soil because it's better for fluffing it. Okay, here's somebody fluffing the soil. And you really got to step hard on that fork. Go down as deep as you can get it. Okay, now the way to get out weeds is with a garden fork. Don't use Roundup. That's what this guy did. And look at his hand now. You can get skin cancer. It kills, well, it'll even kill a lot of the plants that you want to keep. So some people use it on poison ivy. I can sort of understand that, even though I don't think it's a good idea. It also doesn't really work that well on poison ivy. Anyway, don't use herbicides to get rid of your weeds. Just do it by hand. You'll be happy you did. One way to get rid of the weeds is lasagna gardening, which doesn't mean growing tomatoes and basil and stuff. It actually means layering, usually cardboard. The people in this picture use some newspaper too. I wouldn't use newspaper because it has a lot of ink on it. But basically, if you pile a bunch of cardboard over the weeds or the grass that you want to kill, and then wet it down with the hose so it kind of sticks, after a while, it will kill the plants underneath. So like that would be, you could do that maybe if you're not going to plant your garden. Well, if you did it now, if you want to plant your garden like at the end of June or something, then you could kill your plants that way. You still got to dig it up, but it's a lot easier to dig it up once all the grass is dead. Anyway, it's like an easy tip, a lazy tip, if you got the time. Most people don't have the time. Oh, but where I do use that sheet mulching is I put that over poison ivy and try to kill the poison ivy. And then I cover it with wood chips. So if you put down a bunch of cardboard over poison ivy and then you really cover it with wood chips, sometimes you can get free wood chips. If you see like the phone company chopping up trees, you can ask them to drop some off at your house. Okay, so then you got to figure out whether your soil is clayey or sandy. And clayey soil, you can tell it's clayey because it's really sticky and it's slippery between your hands. If it has too much clay in it, and that can get really hard when it dries out, or it also stays wet too long. After a rainstorm, it won't dry out. But there's a solution for it, and I'll let you know what that is in a minute. Okay, so if soil is too sandy, like what you find at the beach, or on like anywhere close to the shore, the soil tends to be very sandy. Then it dries out too quickly. So you got to keep watering it. But there's also a solution for that, which I'll tell you. Now, some plants up in the top left-hand, the top picture, that's my friend Suman. She's harvesting some light root, kind of wild yam. And that really likes sandy soil. And the soil in our herb garden is actually really clayey. So to grow light root, we made a big raised bed of sand but most plants prefer it not too sandy or too clayey. Okay, so here is the secret sauce, whether your soil is too sandy or too clayey. And that is compost. So compost is great. It's like, you don't even really need to take a soil test. Some people do. Because like if you add enough compost, everything's going to be okay for the most part. If your plants don't grow, then you can take a soil test and see what's wrong. But if your soil is too sandy, add compost. If your soil is too clayey, add compost. If your soil is too wet, add compost. If it's too dry, add compost. So I think actually the library did have a program about making compost not too long ago. And Mark, is that like, can people get that on YouTube now?
Yep, that's on our
Okay.
YouTube channel, yes.
Yeah. So I won't bore you with a ton of details about making compost. Super easy to make though. But you can also, in my township, which is west, where do I live? East Pikeland. They'll drop off a whole truck of compost, like municipal compost, for $30, I think. Well, a whole truck. I guess it's like 3 cubic yards, but that's plenty for, most size gardens. I don't know if they do that in Phoenixville, but you can call like your township building or whatever and see, because maybe you have that service. Or some townships, you can go and pick it up yourself, sometimes even for free, compost. This is our compost pile at Kemberton Hills in the herb garden. So we have like a 3-section system where we put on what you see here on the right-hand side, we put all the weeds and, kitchen wastes and mostly weeds, put them in the right-hand side. And then we keep turning it over into 4 heaps, like over the course of a few months. And by the time it's in the one on the far left, it's totally ready to use, just perfect soil. It smells nice and it'll make anything grow. Okay, so form your soil into a raised bed. And even if you don't have like a wooden raised bed, you're still gonna raise up the part where you're gonna plant the plants and have distinct paths, because you don't want to step on your nice soft path that you just spent all that time digging up with a garden fork. You got to keep that nice and loose and fluffy. So so you don't want to make your beds wider than about 4 feet, because you can only reach a couple feet. Now this guy's bed is probably 5 feet wide, but that guy is a lot bigger than me. He's probably at least like 6 feet tall. So he's got a 5-foot bed, but I would recommend not more than about 4 feet, because then you can reach from one side, you can reach in 2 feet to get the weeds out, and from the other side you can. Okay, so this is my husband and my 2 sons. They're digging a bed. This is trying to show you that you don't need to have like a raised bed like demarcated by rocks or wood or bricks or anything. You can just raise it up. This is our herb garden. So we have all raised beds, but with only a couple exceptions. They're not like enclosed with anything. So yeah, you dig it up, compost it, and then you rake it smooth with a rake. And you can just have fun. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. It'll look a lot nicer once the plants are growing in it. So here are some examples of raised beds that are like enclosed. A lot of people like that. It makes it really clear where the edges of the bed are. I think for a small garden, it makes a lot of sense. If it's a bigger garden, I think it's not worth it to try to do it. Oh, some people do. Great though for people in a wheelchair, a nice raised bed. so that they can reach easier. All right. So now the question is, should you plant seeds, or should you okay, you're gonna probably plant seeds either way, or should you plant seeds right into the bed, or should you can you guys see that? That's a 6-pack. Basically, it's you're starting seeds in pots inside. Well, it depends on the plant, whether you're going to plant the seeds outside in the ground, or you're going to start them inside, or maybe you want to buy the plants. So often, if it's something that grows underground, like radishes, carrots, turnips, the part that you eat is underground. Those things usually you're going to put right into the ground. You're going to sow the seeds into the soil. So you're not going to start them inside first, because it would take forever. Radishes, every little radish, if you started that in a little pot and then put it outside, it isn't worth it. So the ones that, like common vegetables that I like to plant the seeds outside, peas. And peas, you can plant those now, and you can plant radishes now. So yeah, just so you can get them at the grocery store, just pick up a packet of peas, make a nice straight row, and mark it. I like to use a popsicle stick. So you look that. Oops, I don't know how to make you see that. Oh, there it is. Oops, upside down. So yeah, popsicle sticks are handy. The nice thing about them is they will break down after a while, unlike the plastic tags. So yeah, what else? Yeah, carrots, sunflower seeds, chard, beets. Those I would all put the seeds right in the soil. Okay, so for bigger plants like tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, zucchini, squash, pumpkins, those it's good to start indoors in pots. You can use paper cups, you can use, yogurt containers, whatever. Put a hole in the bottom of it if you're doing something homemade. Or you can buy these, like in our herb garden, we do use these 6-packs because they're really convenient, because it doesn't take up a lot of space. There's 6 plants there. But if you're just doing it at home, yeah, whatever, paper cups, just punch a hole in the bottom. And then usually it's good to plant a couple seeds in each pot, because a lot of times one of them won't sprout. So, and then you can, if they both sprout, either you can transplant one into a different paper cup, or you can just clip it off if you don't need that many plants. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot to say this. Another kind of a plant that you're going to usually start indoors in pots are also ones that are killed by frost. So that would be anything in the nightshade family, like peppers, tomatoes, not onions, peppers, tomatoes, eggplant. Another things that are killed by frost are squash, basil. That's all I can think of, but there's books about it. Actually, I want to tell you about a couple books at the end. Anyway, those things you're going to want to start in pots indoors. And then after May 10th, or maybe even a little before May 10th, the official frost-free date in Phoenixville is May 10th. That means that usually, like at least 90% of the time, we don't get a frost after May 10th. But I tend to push it a little and start planting stuff in the ground at like May 6th, because it seems like it's getting a little earlier every year when the last frost is. But if you really want to be safe, wait till May 10th, and then you can plant out your tender plants. If you're brand new at gardening, which you should be if you're doing this program because it's for beginners, I would buy your tomato plants. Tomatoes an easy one. I'd probably buy peppers, eggplant. I'd buy a lot of the plants. It costs a lot more than doing it by seed, but most people don't have a window sunny enough to put their plants in where they're going to get enough light to get them started out. And then you've got a good start. You can get rid of all the weeds before you plant it, and then you've got a nice good plant that you bought. And yeah, just stick it in the ground. Okay, here are some plants that can tolerate a frost: broccoli, peas, cabbage, radishes, onions, garlic, kale. Yeah, anything like in the cabbage family, cauliflower, they can all take frost. All right, so if you're going to put the seeds outside in the ground, try to do it in a neat row, make a groove. Can be tricky if you have kids helping you because they aren't necessarily that neat, but oh well, whatever. The nice thing about having it in a row is, for one thing, if you don't really know what it looks like when it first comes up, you can see the row of the plants that you planted. So it's easier to pull the weeds out from around it. Also, if you're going to hoe, then it's really nice if they're in a straight row. We'll talk about hoeing in a few minutes. Okay, so if you bought plants or if you grew them inside in your own pots, then what you're going to do is you're going to make sure there's no weeds in your bed, fluff it all up again if you need to, and then stick the plants in. That's a bean plant somebody's planting there. So stick it in. In general, you want to plant the plant a little bit deeper than what it was growing in the pot. That's not true with trees. You can kill a tree by planting it too deep, but with pretty much any garden plant, you can plant it a little deeper. It makes it a little sturdier in the ground. So it's not like you only have to plant stuff once in the spring. You can reseed. So like you might plant some lettuce in the beginning of May, and then 2 weeks later, plant another row of lettuce seeds, and 2 weeks later, same with radishes. Yeah, probably carrots. Some stuff you kind of plant once, and like cabbage, you do it once and then you harvest it all at the end. Tomatoes, you do that once. But things like greens, often you keep seeding all through the season. Okay, watering in your plants. That's my friend Justin. He's watering some newly planted plants in there. So when you first plant them, you really got to keep them watered every day. And they say with trees, when you plant a tree, you water it every day for a week, every month. Every day for a week, every week for a month, every month for a year, and so on. But I would say with garden plants, they're a lot smaller. So you're going to want to water every day for a week, and then keep doing it every day, even the second week. You got to wait till the roots go a little deep. You want them to get established. So yeah, keep on top of the watering, unless it rains. If it's raining, nature does it. Okay, so now your plants are in the ground, and then all the weeds come. That's why you should start small. It's fun in the spring to make a nice big bed, but this is our herb garden, and you can see we have plenty of helpers weeding it, and it's like a huge area of weeds. We just couldn't keep up with it. Although they're doing a nice job weeding the bed there, but more weeds, more weeding. That's some mullein. Great thing to do with friends, and you can get your friends to help pull the weeds. You want to have a chat with your friends, and it's a great place to do it. Okay, another kind of weeding is hoeing, and so that guy's using a grub hoe, which is great for really big weeds. The hoe in the small picture on the top, that's called a scuffle hoe. And that's really good for small weeds. You just rub it back and forth on the ground. It's good on the path or in the bed. And it slices off the weeds. It leaves the weeds' roots in the ground, and it slices their heads off. As long as they're small, it works really well. If they're bigger, I would say use the kind of hoe on the bottom. But if you can only get one hoe, I'd probably get the kind on the bottom, because your weeds are going to get too big probably. Don't forget to eat the weeds. This is dandelion, and of course you can't, like that cat tried to eat the flower, the seed head. You can't eat the seed head, it's too fluffy, but the leaves of it are so good. They're a little bitter, but with a nice salad dressing, they're really good. And you can mix them with lettuce if you don't like bitter stuff. Really good for the liver. Chickweed, that's another, that is up now because that was growing under the snow. If you have a garden that you were ignoring all winter, which you should, you'll probably find that where the snow was, there's a bunch of chickweed growing now. That's like a really close up. Those flowers are like, I don't know, a 1/4 inch big. But that is such, I just ate a bunch of it today. In fact, I ate so much, I'll probably get diarrhea. That's one thing about chickweed is it does cause diarrhea if you eat too much fresh. But as a tea, it's really good as a lymphatic, which means it kind of gets your lymph flowing through your system. So good for people with like swollen legs. Another great weed in the garden. You could just grow a garden and not plant anything, and the weeds would come up and you could just eat them. Lamb's quarters, it tastes like spinach, and it's actually in the same family as spinach, and it grows so easily, like it's a weed, and you just you cook it like spinach. Great for omelets and stuff. Stinging nettles. Not everybody has stinging nettles as a weed. We have a lot of it in Kemberton Hills because it was planted once and now it grows all over the place. But that is so full of iron. That's Justin and Gabby. They were just picking stinging nettles. It's not, I mean, in that picture they were. Right now it's just starting to come up, but it's a real spring tonic. So good in soup, but you got to wear gloves. Best kind of gloves are dishwashing gloves. Don't try to use medical gloves. It'll sting you right through them. And don't use like cloth gloves because they'll sting you. But oh yeah, you cook that down into a soup. Good stuff. Okay, so even though all those weeds are so good, you probably don't want to spend your whole time weeding. So you can use mulch. Free mulch is leaves. You just put a bunch of leaves. Too many leaves though can make the soil acidic. Actually, the best mulch is probably straw because it also reflects a lot of light back up onto the plants. But you got to buy straw. So I wouldn't use newspapers. Some people do. Some people use black plastic. I think that makes sense, like in a big field maybe, but I wouldn't use black plastic in a garden. I would just keep it weeded. Oh, don't use wood chips. Not in your food garden. You can use it in the paths. Wood chips decay just like everything else. And when they decay, they suck up nitrogen out of the soil. And so your plants, they need nitrogen. So it's okay to put them in paths because you don't want plants growing in the paths, but you don't want wood chips right around your nice plants. Sometimes people like pile these huge piles of wood chips around their landscape trees. It does a great job keeping down the weeds, but I think it's actually harming the tree. Actually, speaking of wood chips harming trees, I know a tree that died because it had too many wood chips. Anyway, okay, so container gardening. It's better to use a container that's a little too big because it holds more moisture. You don't have to water it as much. Add a bit of compost to the potting soil if you have some. You can also buy, a bag. If you're doing container gardening, I would buy like container gardening soil and then maybe buy also a bag of compost and then mix it all together. Before you fill the container with soil, it's good to really wet it well, like put it in a bucket and get it nice and wet. And then, stick in your plants or your seeds. Make sure there's plenty of sunlight. This guy, I just took that picture off the internet, but that guy, he used a lot of buckets. You can use any kind of container. You just got to make sure you drill a hole in the bottom of it so it doesn't get waterlogged. Okay, so if you have small containers, maybe you only have like a small space, like a windowsill. Chives, parsley, mint, lettuce, I guess. You could do some salad greens, radishes, thyme, oregano. Pretty much any of the herbs you can grow in containers. Lettuce, you probably want a bigger container. If you're going to grow something like tomatoes in a container, a big plant, then you're going to want a big container. Otherwise, they won't do well. They won't make many tomatoes. This kid had a good idea. He just used a bag of potting soil and put his tomato plant right in it. Oh, another thing about tomatoes, you got to somehow fence them up. Otherwise, they'll flop over and the tomatoes will rot. Okay, so if you have a container garden, you got to water it pretty much every day in the summer if it doesn't rain when it's hot. Unlike a garden outside, which retains a lot more moisture, they just dry out really quick. If you can train your hamster to do it, that's great. But okay, so now we're going to talk about pests. The one on the left is a Cricopia moth caterpillar, which that's my hand. You can see it's like almost as big as my hand. It's not really a pest. I just couldn't resist putting it in there because it was eating our elderberry bush, but because there was only one of them, you can't really call that a pest. But isn't that thing amazing? Anyway, so bean beetles, flea beetles, they are real pests. They can be. We had flea beetles all over our mint this year. And I'll tell you what I did to get rid of the flea beetles. Didn't use a regular kind of insecticide. I used something called Diatomaceous Earth, which is like this powder. You can get it at most gardening stores. And it's made out of diatoms. If you remember high school biology, diatoms are these little creatures that live in the bottom of the ocean, I think, or somewhere, maybe ponds. Anyway, they have a shell that's basically made out of glass. And it's so fine that it doesn't hurt us. I spread it with my bare hands. But when insects inhale it, or maybe just walk around in it, it makes little cuts in them, and they very quickly die of dehydration. Oh, it actually probably is kind of cruel, but it once it washes off and goes into the soil, it's not it doesn't kill bugs anymore because it just gets all dirty and it's not sharp anymore. Well, it worked on the flea beetles in our mint, and people use it for bean beetles too. Another thing that some people use is they call it insecticidal soap. It's basically soap, and you spray it on your plants. some of the pests don't like that. Like aphids, they don't like it. Okay, so aphids, they're usually either black or white or green or red or yellow. Actually, purple, they can be pretty much any color in the rainbow. They're tiny and they're really soft bodied. And you know who loves them are ladybugs. And that picture on the top is actually the larvae of a ladybug. And that larvae is going to eat hundreds of aphids. And the adults also love aphids. So if you see ladybugs in your garden, look around, you'll probably see aphids. And as long as you have enough ladybugs, you shouldn't have a problem with aphids. Some people even buy ladybugs if they have a bad aphid problem. But usually they'll just come, the ladybugs, as long as you haven't like sprayed pesticides or something that kills all the bugs. Birds will eat a lot of bugs too. So you might want to encourage them, put up a bluebird house. And bats. Bats can eat so many mosquitoes in like every night. They'll eat like, I don't know, 1,000 mosquitoes or something. But they also eat some garden pests. Okay, here is another friend. That is a bee. That one happens to be a bumblebee. You can tell because it's nice and fuzzy. Without bees, pretty much any of the plants that we've talked about so far wouldn't even be here, because bees take the pollen from one flower and give it to another flower of the same species, and that makes seeds. And so most plants that have flowers, like 95% of plants with flowers, are pollinated by some kind of bee. I mean, they may be pollinated by other things too, butterflies, hummingbirds. But we wouldn't have strawberries, or we wouldn't have pumpkins, and we wouldn't have a lot of things. We would have corn, and we would have grains because they're all wind pollinated. But we wouldn't have a lot of our nice fruits and vegetables without bees. So be nice to bees, don't spray pesticides. Okay, other pests, the cutest pests of all. So if you have deer, there is a very clever trick for keeping deer out of your garden. It's a product, it's an item. You can get a sprinkler that's motion sensitive. So what you do is you attach your hose, you put 4 AA batteries in it, you attach your hose to the sprinkler, and it has this thing like a thing that detects motion at night. I turn mine off in the morning and turn it on at night. And then when a deer walks into your garden, the sprinkler turns on and it's like, and it totally scares away the deer. It also is really good at scaring away people because sometimes people come to our herb garden at night, and it's really funny to hear them talk about it the next day. Like, I was in the garden last night and all of a sudden the sprinkler turned on. So it's kind of fun. It works in the day too. So you do got to turn it off in the day when people are working in there. But anyway, it works against deer. I don't know if it works against raccoons because we haven't had that problem. And I don't really think that it worked against the groundhogs. I think they just got used to it. But what works against groundhogs is dogs. So if you don't have a dog, borrow a dog, or get your friend with a dog to come over and you guys can weed your garden together. Dogs like to eat groundhogs. Even if they don't eat them, I think just them being around scares them away. Oh, okay. So another pest are snails and slugs. And the treatment for snails and slugs is to get like some jar lids and fill them with beer and set them in. That's why there's a picture of a baby drinking beer there. Don't feed beer to babies, but feed them to slugs and snails if you want to get rid of them. So slugs and snails love beer. They love the smell of it. And so they'll crawl over to these like, shallow lids, or you can use a saucer or something. Put it at like the same level as the soil. So it's really easy for the snails and slugs to get in there. And they'll go in there, and I don't know if they get drunk and die or if they just drown, but you'll go there and in the morning there'll be a bunch of like dead slugs in the beer. Apparently you can eat slugs, so I suppose you could cook them up, but if you lick a slug though, your tongue will get numb. And I've tried that a couple times and it really works. It must be some kind of defense that they have. All right, here are my youngest two kids. And I wanted to show you something about corn, because a lot of kids like planting corn. It's a really fun plant to grow because it gets so big. But if you don't plant enough of it, see how stunted that corn is? Here's a close-up. So what happened was we only had like 6 stalks of corn. And corn is not bee pollinated. Corn is wind pollinated. And if you don't have enough corn around to blow around the pollen, the corn is going to be stunted like this. It was still good. It was still a lot of fun and everything. But if you want big, nice, fat ears of corn filled out, you're going to have at least 16 plants is what they say. So you're going to need like a bed, probably a 4x4 bed, and put put 16, 16 corn plants in a block. I would say at least a 6x6 bed, at least 16 if you want really perfect corn. And that's where you got to really keep out those raccoons. And I don't really know how to do it. Maybe that sprinkler or a dog. A fence won't really do it for raccoons. Speaking of kids, if you have any kids, try to get them involved in the garden. It's a great way to spend time together. That little guy is my friend Theo. He's harvesting potatoes there with his dad. Okay, here are my 2 youngest kids again. So you can see Clara is happy because she has a lot of radishes, and Diggy is sad because he only has a few. And this was an experiment that I did. So I actually had, 40 radish seeds. 20 of them I put in, I divided them into 2 piles of 20 seeds, exactly the same species and everything, variety. Buried 1 jar in the ground for the winter, but it was in the jar, so it stayed dry, and put the other jar in my basement. And then when we planted them, and this was actually a real experiment, and it was blind. I didn't know which was which. I had one of my kids mix them up and not tell me which was which, but one said U and one said B, and I didn't know if B meant buried or basement. And anyway, I did not know what I was planting. Anyway, the result was that the ones that were buried in the jar underground for the winter did so much better. This is exactly the same number of radish seeds planted. They germinated better and they grew bigger. So anyway, you can have fun doing experiments. All right, then it is time to harvest. Don't wait too long. Now, a lot of guys seem to think that size matters. Actually, it doesn't. Quality matters. And if you wait too long to harvest something, it'll be big and it probably won't be as good. So keep on top of harvesting, especially with like squash-like things. And at the end, give thanks for this amazing planet that we live on and all the plants that grow here. It's just, we're pretty lucky to live in a place that you can grow such variety. And maybe this year for Thanksgiving, you'll be able to serve some of your own stuff that you grew. And that is the end of my formal presentation. So, oops, now I'm open for questions if anybody has any.
That's great, Martha. Thank you for that presentation. And please feel free now, folks, to unmute yourselves with any questions.
You mentioned you were going to recommend some books.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So here's one that's, if you have kids, I'd highly recommend this. It's full of gardening projects to do with kids. Growing Up Green. It's by Alice Skelsey and Gloria Huckabee. And it might be out of print now, but you can still get a copy on the internet. And this is a great book, Farming While Black, but it's good for white people too, because it has a lot of really good information, and it has a lot about the history of farming. Talks about, well, it talks a lot about the history of farming, like from Africa on up. And of course, we all came from Africa originally. But it has a lot of practical information too, how to raise animals like chicks, and how to do city gardens, and just planting advice. So I'd highly recommend it, by Leah Penniman. I don't have a copy of the other one I wanted to point out, but it's available for free online, and it's called How to Grow More Vegetables Than You Ever Thought Possible on Less Land Than You Can Imagine, by John Jevons. If you just type in how to grow more vegetables on Google, you can get a copy of the book, but you can also, the whole book is on a PFD, so you can get it for free. Now, it has a lot of really technical information. So I don't know, I mean, it might not be the first book you'd want if you're a very beginner gardener, but as you get more into it, it has a lot of good stuff. The one thing to remember is he was in Australia or New Zealand when he wrote it. So when he talks about a northern exposure, he means a southern exposure for us, because a northern exposure down there is like a southern exposure to us. I didn't even know that until I read that book, but couldn't understand why he kept talking about a northern exposure having so much sunlight.
There's a question in the chat. Any good books for patio/container vegetable gardens?
I don't know. There probably are some good ones. Check out the Phoenixville Library. I bet they have some.
I was just going to say that. There are a couple of the books that you've already mentioned are in the Chester County Library System. And lots of books on container gardening too. I know that.
Hey, Martha.
Hi, Mar. Hi, Tavaki.
Hey. Now, I was wondering about worms, because last year it was our first try with a little garden, and I had big problems with the deer. I tried to grow worms, but I guess I didn't do right, because, they say that worms are wonderful for maintaining the earth well oxygenated, right?
Yeah.
And the other big problem that I had were the, that plague, the insect that is being eating so much around. That is a plague all over Pennsylvania. That
spotted lanternfly?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, they ate everything. Everything.
Oh.
Except the tomatoes. The only thing they respect was the tomatoes and the parsley. and the squash. That's all. And peppers. They didn't like peppers either. But everything else they ate all. Is there anything we can do about that?
Well, one thing you can try to do is before the season gets going, look for their egg cases. They look like kind of tan pieces of like styrofoam on trees around there. Make sure your yard doesn't have any ailanthus trees in it, because ailanthus attracts them. And you should probably just cut down the ailanthus trees if you have any.
Oh,
Some people use a vacuum cleaner, and if they'll only jump frontwards, they won't jump backwards. So if you put the vacuum cleaner right in front of them, they'll jump right up into the vacuum cleaner.
oh. Huh.
So that's something that you can try. We used actually one of those rechargeable little, I don't know, it's like a car vacuum. It's rechargeable, so you can take it right out to the garden.
Right.
And it worked pretty well. They're hard to catch.
They are very hard.
Yeah.
They're very fast.
Yeah, they're really fast. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then about the worms, where can I get the right kind of worm to put on the earth? Is that something that is available around the gardens? Do you have some that you can?
Yeah, I could give you some of our compost, which would have some worms in it. And then if you have a nice compost pile, then worms will just come. But you could add a few just to get it started. The compost worms are the little red worms. They're
Right.
not the big earthworms, but big earthworms, well, they're a bit controversial now, but I still think earthworms are great for the soil. They certainly are good at breaking down stuff.
Right.
So if there's enough organic matter, enough compost in your soil, you will have enough worms.
Okay. Okay. So that would be through the compost, right? The organic matter, right?
Yeah.
Right. And with leaves.
Leaves. Yeah, leaves. You can make a pile just of leaves, and then usually a lot of good worms will come into that.
Right. Right.
You can even get leaves from your neighbors and just make a nice big pile, like along that,
I have plenty
yeah.
myself. So I'm good with leaves. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, Martha.
Wait one
Thanks,
second.
Mar.
Wait one second.
Can you see the other questions in the chat, Martha?
Oh, I didn't look. Let me see. How do I do this?
I can read them if you can't. Get them. Toward the end there.
Oh,
from
are there
Jim.
apps to help identify plants? Oh, yeah, there is. Okay, there's something called iNaturalist. That's an app, and you take a picture of the plant, and then it gives you suggestions as to what it is. Another thing, if you're on Facebook, there's a Facebook group called Plant Identification. And take 3 or 4 pictures of the plant. You got to say where it is, where you are. Even just Pennsylvania is good enough. And then you post it onto the Facebook page. I actually find that's better than the iNaturalist app, because it's real people looking at it, and they'll have a better idea of what might actually be grown there. Yeah, so I would use the What Plant Is This Facebook group if you're on Facebook. There's probably a ton of other apps too. iNaturalist is the one that I know. Oh,
There's
let's
a couple
see.
of questions above that, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Miracle Grow for herbs. I wouldn't use Miracle Grow for herbs. Herbs, almost all herbs don't need a lot of fertilizer. I might give them a little compost, especially if they're outdoors. I wouldn't use Miracle Grow. Okay, can herbs be grown in the house in the winter in pots? Yes, they can. Here, let me let me give you a little tour of some of the herbs. So there we have a nice mosquito plant, a scented geranium. There's a bay tree. There's a patchouli. Oh, we got some coriander going on here. Anyway, yes, in the other room I have like rosemary. Okay, rosemary is a nice one to grow in pots. Stuff like parsley, it doesn't do so well in pots in the winter. It does good in pots outside in the summer. Oh, you know what's a nice one for pots is a lemongrass. You can grow that all winter. I've got a few of those in our house. Some stuff kind of loses all its leaves in the winter, like lemon verbena. So it doesn't look nice as a houseplant, but you will keep it alive. Oh, best herb to grow in a pot is aloe vera. It's good for whenever you get a burn.
Anyone else? Don't be shy.
Martha, again, about the mulch, you said the best mulch is a straw. Yes, a straw like the one that you used to make the straw guys in Halloween? Is that the straw we're talking about?
Yep.
Okay, so the one that you buy on bales, right?
Yeah, you can get bale of straw. By the way, make sure it's straw and not hay, because hay has a lot of seeds in it. And then you'll be planting grass when you're trying to actually make the weeds go away.
Oh, so how do I know that? How do I guess, shake it?
Well, just ask. I mean, straw is like shinier and bigger and
How are you
flatter.
feeling, Janice?
And
Oh, good.
yeah,
It
and
went okay?
hay is
Wonderful.
it's not as shiny and yellow, and it's got seeds in it. You
Oh,
can
good.
usually see the seeds.
Oh,
All right.
okay. Okay. But I should be able to buy a straw in any garden area, garden shop spot like that, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
Question there in chat about chives.
Oh, what about chives and pots? Yeah, you can grow chives and pots. They're perfect. Yep. They do really well inside.
Again, thank you, Martha, and love your sense of humor too in those slides. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we invite you to the next presentation in the Community Gardening Around the Village series, which will take place Thursday, April 22nd, and that is Earth Day. And it is the Earth Day Pledge, bite-sized commitments you can make to our planet that will make a big difference. And our presenter will be David Ryle from Phoenixville's Trellis for Tomorrow. And you can register for that program on Phoenixville Public Library's events calendar. Just go to www.phoenixvillelibrary.org and look for the events calendar. And look for the video from tonight's event up on our YouTube channel. Oh, there's one more question that came in. What about basil in pots inside house in winter?
I haven't had much luck with basil in pots inside the house. I don't think it gets enough light in the winter. It grows nice in pots outside in the summer. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming, and good luck with your garden this summer, everybody.
All right. Great. Thanks again, Martha, and good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks a lot.